We're leaving the EU. The EU doesn't want to encourage other people to leave, and there are populist parties across the EU that are proposing that their countries should leave. And in those circumstances, it's not likely that the EU is going to give us a generous ride.
What are the chances of the UK being able to negotiate its own trade deals with other countries outside the EU?
Well, I think once we've left the EU, there shouldn't be very many obstacles per se to negotiating trade deals with other countries like, say, the US or Brazil or so on, that we haven't already got agreements with through the EU. So that's not too bad. The issue is that we can't really start doing that until we've done a deal with the EU. And in those circumstances, that could be quite slow. And that's a worry, I guess, at this stage. But actually doing the deals themselves, that might also be more difficult than we think. There's quite a lot of countries out there that we don't have deals with, and it takes time and resources to negotiate them. And we don't have a lot of experience in doing that, because up until now that's been done by the EU on our behalf. The other aspect of this whole Brexit and trade issue is that trade has become very controversial. We are now in a position where the EU has two large agreements that one is it's completed with Canada, and the other that it's still in process with the US. And both of these have turned out to be very controversial, to the point that in trying to ratify an agreement that has been made for a year or so, we've run into problems in getting it ratified in the Walloon Parliament. That is, in a regional parliament in Belgium. And without the Walloon Parliament changing its mind, it will be impossible to do a deal with Canada. Now, Canada is up at the top of the Global Development League tables. It is one of the most European third countries in the world. It's full of really nice people, we get along with and we don't have any quarrels with, and we still can't do a deal with them. Somehow they're a threat to us. And if that's the level of public understanding of what trade agreements are about, then it's hard to know what we can do. And it's the same with the US now. The US is not a lot like Europe. It hasn't got a welfare state in the way we have. It hasn't got health care in the way that we have, and so on and so forth. But nonetheless, it's very similar culturally to us, and we're finding it difficult to do deals with them. People are very suspicious. They're very suspicious because big business is involved, and wherever you go with trade, you are dealing with big business. That doesn't seems bode well for the UK agreements when they come to be put round the parliaments in the EU member states for ratification. And I certainly know that during the referendum campaign, whenever I went to a meeting, someone always asked a question about TTIP, the Transatlantic Investment and Partnership. So it's clear that lots of people in Britain share these suspicions and bad feelings about these trade deals.
And about the trade deals, I mean, what I think people's concern was the what was the name of these special state disputes. So are you concerned about that aspect of trade deals?
Yes. Well, a lot of people are worried about investor-state dispute settlement because it seems to give large companies some sort of special privileged dispute settlement court of appeal for things they don't like. And there have been examples of tobacco companies in particular using ISDS to at least put a chill on public policy towards smoking. So there is some evidence that there's a potential issue there. That said, when you're dealing with countries like the US and Canada, for that matter, you're looking at countries that have got very well developed legal systems, and there's no evidence from where ISDS has been in use that the panels have actually favoured business over public policy. The evidence that there is that this may be just a little bit overdone, and it's the wrong reason. And the other thing is that the public concern seems to be a bit random. It's about the US and it's about Canada. The EU is negotiating an investment treaty with China, and we've agreed to ISDS in that. Now, who would you rather have a legal institution shared with, Canada or China? But no one's complaining about China. So there's something not quite holding together in this story about ISDS being all bad.
And I think that sort of a lot of concern these days comes from the growing inequality in the world. That everybody knows that 2% of the world own 98% of the world's wealth. So I think there is a general lack of trust in any large corporation across the globe, because everybody's trying to say, hey, who has the money and why isn't this fair? So don't you think that, perhaps like the reason that people are so suspicious is of these corporations is because of the rising inequality? And don't you think that do you think that there should even be these sort of what's called these separate dispute settlements involved in these trade deals at all, or should they be taken out of trade?
It's very clear that there has been increasing inequality, particularly in developed countries, and that has shown up in populism of various sorts, not excluding the Brexit issue, but also in the US, Trump, and right across continental Europe. But the paradox is that actually global inequality is actually reducing, because very poor people are getting quite a lot better off. They're not very well off still, but they're a lot better off than they were. And you look at China, 400 million or whatever pulled into higher incomes and out of poverty level incomes. That makes a big difference to the global statistics. So there's a bit of a paradox there, and what's driven that for China, that big increase in equality, is trade. So there's the possibility that trade can drive equality as well as harm it. And also it's not clear whether trade's the culprit or technology's the culprit in the increased inequality. So it's quite a mixed story. It's very hard to say absolutely definitely it's one thing or the other. It might be, and the European Union is trying to push this idea of some sort of multilateral investment court that is not dependent on private sector jurists, so to speak.